And welcome to Mondays, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is time for some waffles. It's that time of week. It's Drew's Day, Monday. It's 8 p.m. in the UK, and we get to talk about science fiction and fantasy and writing and stuff. Yay! And just generally chilling around and having a good time. Look at my hat, not straight. It's just not right. There we go. How are we all? Did you make it? The top 1% waffle stream on Twitch. Where's my waffle thingy? Hang on a minute. Hang on. Hold your horses. Boom. There you go. How are we all? Are we good? Good to see you all. Good to see you. Who we got? We got Nim, Duskgrin, Wintermute, Commander O'Connor, Carissimo, GR9980, Dale 1988, Dio977. Why do people put numbers? It's very hard to say. Reg W, Big 39GT. Oh, and the Space Birds. And Glenn is here. Glenn, Commander Terraformer, Ring the Waffles, and everyone's here. Commander Veteran, excellent. Waffle Birds. I've got the new hat pin. Have you seen the new hat pin? There we go. I've got a telescope now. Look at that. Yay. 77 is the year I'm born. I see. Oh, you're a relative young person then. That's excellent. Anyway, lovely to see you all this evening. How are you? I must admit, because I missed my Saturday stream. It's been a while. I feel the gap in my life between the streams. It's just that summer gets very busy with stuff, so my Saturday stream unfortunately suffers a bit as a result of that. So apologies for that. If you were hoping to do a bit more retro stuff, we will get there, but there may be a few gaps in the schedule, alas, because things. But the weekdays are actually more regular because they just are. Weekends tend to get booked up with other bits and pieces. Scoping out your hat pin. Very good, very good. Yeah. So my youngest son actually bought me a bunch of hat pins for Father's Day last Sunday, and so I got a variety of pins now. So I'm going to work my way through them as we go. So I quite like this one. There's a little telescope, which is obviously for the astronomy side of things. For the Mavic Air, what was I wearing? I think I had, because I was on holiday in Scotland. I think I had my where is it? Just trying to find it. I've got where's my Scotland badge? It's in here somewhere. Trying to find it. There it is. So I was wearing that one. My Canadian and Scotland. My Scotland flight. They are. That's the one I was using. So because of course I am Canadian by birth, and British by nationality. Come on, camera. I'm here. Focus. Are we going to focus? Come on, you can do it. Autofocus is so good. It works just like that. Oh well, I'm going to be slightly soft for a while until the camera. Hello, I'm here. Have you got me? There it goes. Oh, I'm supposed to be autofocusing. Sorry about that, Drew. So fun to see the vacation drone video. And go, yeah. So I like mucking about with cameras. I'm a bit of a photography sort of. I just enjoy photography, I suppose, and there's only so much you can do, obviously, with a normal camera and a tripod. But I was interested in to see how good drones and things were. So I did about a year and a bit ago. I actually got this drone. I haven't. As per usual these days, like, really exciting, you're going to get the technical thing, let's try it out, and then 5 minutes later, yeah, it works, and then I've forgotten to use it for 9 months. So I did take it with me, and I actually got some footage, and I learned a lot about how you fly a drone in order to get good footage, because the 5 minutes I got there is it's probably about half an hour's worth of flying around trying to get the thing to do what I wanted to do. So yes, it's like most things actually, lots and lots of editing. And the quality of what you end up with is very much to do with how much time and effort you put into doing. So what I hadn't realised in flying a drone, of course, is you have to plan what you're trying to do. You have to think about it, and that's before. And I don't know if it's the same in different countries, but in the UK we now have to register our drone. So my drone actually has an ID number which I have to print on the side of it, and I have to pay a fee and pass a test to actually fly it. A civil aviation authority person can interrogate my drone and ask it for its ID number, and if that isn't correct and up to date, my drone will be confiscated. So so there's all sorts of laws, which is probably a good idea, because if you fly them in areas where you're not supposed to fly them, it's not very nice for people. You're not supposed to fly them over residential areas and places like that, so you have to be away from things. Fortunately, where I was, there were no restrictions at all, which was really, really nice, because which was excellent. So anyway, I could definitely recommend it. And this has got an image stabilizing camera and all sorts of clever stuff. It's clever tech. It really is. Come further north next. Well, I have been up to the Highlands previous year. I went to where was I? Up near what's I've forgotten the name. Is it Inverness? Anyway, I went to the battle site of Culloden, which I wanted to see, and one of these days I will do the Indy 500 as well, which I haven't. It's on my bucket list. So that's something I will do. But Scotland is utterly beautiful. I went round the Cairngorms, had a walk up there, and got snowed on, which was excellent. And then came down to the lakes at the bottom. So so Inverness, they're nice. There's definitely a nice part of the world up there as well. So we stayed up there for a week as well. I enjoyed that. A bit, to be honest. Whilst I did like the Highlands of Scotland for the wildness and the kind of sheer amazingness of the mountains, it was a bit too wild for me in terms of a place. It takes an awfully long time to get anywhere. I think I got kind of because there's only one road. If you want to go somewhere in northern Scotland, what I discovered is there's only one road in any particular direction that takes you to where you need to go. And if you want to go, I don't know, sort of diagonally or crossways, there's no way to do it unless you've got a helicopter. Because the road follows the contours of the terrain, which I suppose it would. I always get stuck behind a massive lorry, or somebody in a caravan doing about 25 miles an hour. It just takes you hours to get anywhere. So it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place if you're not in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry when you're driving in that part of Scotland anyway. Whereas the southern part of Scotland is a little bit more easy to navigate, I suppose. I need to upgrade my drone so it can carry me. Now, when you have the 500, spend a day at least on Orkney. We have it. I shall definitely try that. Yes, I shall definitely try that. Sampling beer is an excellent idea. So I'm looking forward to doing that. It is a long-term plan of mine, actually, to sort of, I suppose, almost emigrate to Scotland, because I really like it up there. So we'll see how it goes. But plans are afoot. Maybe one day I'll be streaming from Scotland rather than down here in Kent. We'll see how it goes. So that was fun. And then on Saturday, my eldest son and I had a driving experience booked, which was actually last year's birthday present for my wife to both of us, and it's taken us a year to get it booked because of COVID, of course. And so anyway, we went for this driving experience, and surprisingly enough, my son, who is now he's 21, he's 20, he'll be 21 this year, was rather better at it than I was. Play more than simulation driving. I do like driving, but I do feel I may have left my Formula One debut a little bit too late. The thing I found was I've been driving cars for 30 years, and of course. Of course, the thing, this is a single-seater racing car. So when you sit in it, it's incredibly claustrophobic. You're lying down with your feet out in front of you to press the pedals, and you can't really see out. All you can see is the tops of the front wheels and this little pointy thing, and that's about it. You can just see a tiny bit of the road. So it's incredibly claustrophobic. The gear stick. I'm used to a normal. At least for the UK, a normal H-pattern gear stick, which is, of course, in the UK is on the left-hand side of the driver, because we sit on the right-hand side. In these single-seater racing cars, it's not an H-pattern gearbox. It's something they call a sequential, where you have to push it forward to go down and pull it backwards to go up, and you have to kind of keep a mental count in your head as to which gear you're actually in, because there's nothing in the car that tells you, and it's on the right-hand side, so. To totally recalibrate what you're doing, because I want to change gear. Use this hand. And then of course, it's incredibly noisy. Loads of stuff is going on, and when you turn a corner, it's literally is like a darty little thing compared to a normal car. And we had so many laps that we were going around. So I was slowly beginning to calibrate my brain into the actual process of driving the car, whereas of course my son was being young, instantly adapted to it and was going around the laps about 4 seconds faster than me on a 40-second lap. So you can see how much better he was than I was. And my son has no fear of death and dismemberment. Yes, as you get older, you do. There's definitely part of your brain that goes in, I'm going to crash, I'm going to die, I'm going to crash, I'm going to die, I'm going to crash, I don't want to die, I don't want to crash, I'm not going to slow down. And then after about 8 laps, I was physically going, this is beginning to hurt. My arms are getting weak. I feel like a T-Rex. I can't do little arms, I can't do it. So yes, my laps were getting faster up to a point, and then they sort of tailed off. You can see the lap times going down again because I'm actually getting knackered. My son was just getting better and better and better. So, alas, I did have we had a huge fun. It was good. It was just good mucking about with your son and doing stuff. But I left it to be late, a bit late to be a top racing driver out here. So there we go. Well, I think, oddly enough, to bring it slightly back to a writing theme, which of course is what this stream is supposed to be about. One thing that did occur to me probably about lap 9, as my arms were beginning to hurt, was the physical effort involved in driving. Because this car has no power steering, no power brakes, no nothing. It literally is just an engine on 4 wheels. And it's very, very visceral because it's super lightweight and quite powerful. It's twice the power of weight of any other car that I've regularly driven. And as a result, it's a very physical experience. So I must admit, I was about 9 laps in when I was thinking, this is beginning to hurt. I was thinking, this is, if I imagine, being in a spacecraft or something, and I'm physically having to fight the machine to do whatever it is I want, land or fight an alien baddie or whatever it happens to be. The idea of actually getting physically tired during whatever it is that you're doing, my brain was beginning to take notes, and I think I'm going to use that in the upcoming novel. The sheer physical experience of so much noise and so much vibration and so much data, if you like, coming into you for you to process, and then the pain, and it literally is pain. Your muscles start to fade, and you're starting to tremble as you're trying to hold things, and the mental part of you is now kind of trying to overcome the physical part of you in order to keep going to do the thing you do. Those, I thought, that's an essence I want to capture for a future novel. So it's interesting, in the midst of doing a lap in a Formula Renault race car, I was still going back to I got some ideas for writing. So there we go. I'm glad to hear they put the gear shift on the correct side in race cars. Now. You don't want to go there, do you? No, you don't want to go there, do you? I was pretty good at the old arcade game Pole Position. Oh, that was fun, wasn't it? Yes, but I would not be quite as good in a real race car. I must admit, it's one of the first times I've thought to myself, I am noticing as I'm getting older, and this is a horrible thing to have to say, but it is true. As I'm getting older, I just can't process things so quickly. And in this car, the fact that I had to recalibrate the way steering worked, recalibrate clutch and foot pedals and the gear stick and the amount of thing that I was turning in and the noise, the sheer noise, and then the G-force, because of course you're wearing a helmet, which is a bit weighty on top of your head. But when you're going through a corner at 70 miles an hour, that becomes quite a lot of weight that's sort of trying to bend your head out of that. Like this, and then it's the other way, and it's the other way, and so your neck muscles are trying to keep your head upright at all times, and your head's bouncing around like this because the car's all and stuff. You'll get tired quite quickly. Surprisingly, how knackered you get. And I have now, having done that, and this is a car that is, probably 1/3, if that, the performance of like a Indy car or a Formula One car. The fact that those guys can do 70 laps or more. non-stop. I have some serious respect for them, because the just simple physical endurance of doing that is something that is a thing. Okay, so who knows? But but my brain tends to work like that. If I encounter something that's different to normal, my brain goes, I'll catalogue that under things that I might be able to write about. And that old phrase from it is a real cliche. Write what you know. You may have heard of that if you're in the writing kind of thing. Write what you know. To which I go, okay, so how many of you have been in a spaceship then? Because it's like, you can't write what you know in science fiction and fantasy, can you? It's just like, duh. Okay, I'm going to just go and be a wizard today. It's just like, that's like, I'm being a bit flippant. That's not quite what write what you know means. Write what you know is mostly about, if you've had an experience in something, use that to inform your writing. So if you've been in a place where, let's take the car example. I've been in a place where I'm in a machine. It's a violent, noisy, vibrating, horrible kind of really vicious sort of machine, and I'm struggling to achieve a thing by driving around a track. I can use my perceptions of how I feel and how tired I'm getting, and the sense of slight, and particularly at the beginning when I'm familiarising myself, the sense of slight intimidation. Here's a really, really powerful thing that I may not be able to master. That sense of anticipation, you can write those things in, and then you can transfer those into a spaceship or a battleship or whatever other thing that you want to kind of make up. So write what you know does have applicability, but it's not a kind of wait until you've flown a warp-powered hyperspace-capable starship before you write about it. You can't do it. And if you're going to, the other thing with write what you know is, if you're going to write characters of different genders and things, you can't wait until you become a woman or a man, depending on which gender it is, or any other gender you choose to call. You can't. You've got to take your best guess, and your best guess is okay. All right. So don't get hung up on I'm a man, I can't write for a woman, or I'm a woman, I can't write for a man, or I'm anything else, and I can't write for any other gender that I want to choose, or I can't do a gay perspective or a lesbian perspective, or whatever it happens to be. Just observe. Do the best you can. As long as you're respectful, you'll be fine. Write what you know is one of those things you've got to become that. No, that's not quite what it means. But there we go. Hello chat, says Philip R. Hello, good to see you. Apologies if you answered this, but there was an experience day, and how much did it cost you? I must admit, I don't actually know, Rob. It was an experience day, but it was a birthday present, so I don't know how much it cost. Inertial dampening system is offline, Captain. Head flies off. Yes. But that experience, I must admit, for those of you who've read my Shadewood series, there's a scene in I think it must be book 2 actually, where Zoella is running along a pier to jump onto the Mobilus, and the Mobilus is backing away from the pier, and she doesn't make the jump. She falls short into the water, and there's a moment there while she's sort of sucked down by the surge of the propellers, and she suddenly realises that she might drown, and then she's struggling to get back to the surface, and she can't really swim very well, and then suddenly there's this rope, and then she manages to pull herself back up, and she's kind of coughing and spluttering and stuff. Well, something like that did happen to me. So that's another example of where an experience which actually was really, really unpleasant at the time did inform my ability to write a descriptive scene. So hopefully if you read that scene, if you remember that scene, you can use things like that to your advantage by going, okay, how did I feel and what was it like, and you can get something there that maybe someone else is just imagining it, doesn't quite get because they haven't experienced themselves. So you can use those things quite powerfully. So that's the thing. And the other one is when I had many years ago, I had a nasty turn with the heart condition I've got, and I literally passed out in front of my wife, which very alarming for my poor wife. I literally just had this stabbing pain, and I just went down like a sack of potatoes. And I remember the pain, and then I obviously blacked out. And then my wife, I didn't know this because I was unconscious. My wife had, rung 999 or 911 as it would be in the UK. We call it 999 in the UK for some strange reason. 999 dates from a time when we used to have dial phones, and 999 is the slowest possible number to dial. Why they chose that, I have no idea. Anyway, an ambulance was on its way because my wife assumed I'd had a heart attack, and that was it. And it certainly seemed like it at the time. Anyway, so I remember coming back to consciousness, and I was literally lying on the floor. My wife had kind of put me into the recovery position, and I was lying on the floor, and I just remember coming to and looking, and all I could see was the ground or the carpet of the room I was in, and a chair leg. And of course, from my perspective at that time, the carpet was like that, and the chair leg was like that. And I remember looking at that, thinking, "That's not right." That's all my brain was capable of processing at that point in time, because presumably it had some sort of oxygen starvation to my brain. Mild, it hadn't caused any damage, but it was enough for my brain to sort of reset into, okay, I have no idea what's going on here, but that carpet is definitely not right. That carpet should not be at right angles to the normal state of things, and the chair, that's also at right angles. That's incorrect too. Something is clearly up. That's all my brain was actually capable of doing at this point in time. And I don't know how long I was there, because I didn't move. And I was just staring at this chair leg and this carpet. And I remember going, no, it's definitely wrong. That's 90 degrees off where it's supposed to be. And my brain went into, a spiral of trying to analyse why on earth the carpet would be at 90 degrees north, without coming to any conclusions, other than it was wrong and odd. And then the sense of disorientation, the carpet wrong and the chair leg is wrong. Where am I? You know that scene from Douglas Adams where the whale is conjured into existence and it's falling through space. What am I? I've got a tail. How do I know it's called a tail? I've no idea. What's this great big round thing? That whole scene. It's exactly like that, coming back from unconsciousness. I was like, who am I? Why am I lying on a carpet? Why is the carpet at 90 degrees to where it's supposed to be? How do I know it's at 90 degrees to where it's supposed to be? And your brain just goes around in this completely weird sort of trying to rationalise its existence in the world that doesn't make sense. Because I'm assuming your brain is, for some reason, it's kind of shot off or short-circuited your short-term memory. You just don't know what's going on. And you're in this state where part of your brain is trying to process facts and trying to be rational and sensible, but it hasn't got any information to process other than what it's immediately got in front of it. And that's where I was. And so I captured that sense of disorientation once I was back to reasonably normal anyway. Trying to gather that sort of sense. So there's various scenes in my book, my books, where people do get knocked unconscious, and their reaction when they wake up, because you see them in movies. When somebody gets whacked on the back of the head, which is extremely dangerous, so don't do that to people, because actually whacking people on the back of the head doesn't just knock them out normally, it does actually cause brain damage. It's a very bad thing to do. When they do it in virtually all movies, they either whack them on the back of the head with a revolver, or they whack them on the back of the head with a bottle or a club or something. And they go down like a sack of potatoes, and then 10 minutes later they go, "Oh, ow, oh, well, what happened there?" That's not realistic, okay? Don't do that. Whereas I'd fainted due to, as it turned out, catastrophic drop in blood pressure, lying down allowed my body to recover, so I came back to consciousness. But my brain was a little bit away with the fairies at this point. And so that's the thing. The other thing that got me was for about a day afterwards, I couldn't read, and it was most weird bit. And I'll say that again. I couldn't read. I was trying to read to my son, who was at the time not very old, about 4 or 5. One of the kids' books. you know, Jack has the ball, Jack has the red ball, Jack has a very nice shiny red ball, all that sort of stuff. I couldn't read it. You know, I was pretty much okay myself. I was a bit vague, I mean, more vague than I usually am. And I just got this book out, opened it up, and went. And I could see there were words, and I could recognise all the symbols, and I could see the picture. I knew what it said, but I couldn't read it. And I just stared at these black squiggles on the page, going, "Well, those letters I can read." So I had no idea what they were, and it took about a day, and then my brain obviously came back in and sorted itself out. So there are some very, very strange side effects to things, and I've captured that in some of my stories to try and capture some of the realisms of the experiences I had. So basically the upshot there is, if you've had a slightly wacky experience, you know, make use of it in a book, because it's quite a good thing to have. Brain reboot, that's exactly what it is. The brain's a very, 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 very strange thing. Please, sir, can you whack me on the back of the head so I can write about it? The other one that I've had, and I don't recommend this one either, is I once had a really, really sharp pain in the stomach, which turned out to be a slightly twisted intestine. I don't know how you get a twisted intestine, but anyway, I got a slightly twisted intestine, but I didn't know that at the time. All I had was excruciating pain, so bad, again, that I almost passed out. And the guys at work, fortunately I was at work at the time, called an ambulance for me, and the ambulance came out and picked me up. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me either. So the nurse basically said, "We're going to give you something for the pain." And I was kind of like, "Oh, what are you going to give me for the pain?" She says, "Morphine." And, you know, it's a pretty potent drug, morphine, for those of you who don't know. Anyway, so in goes the morphine. And what happened next, I can only describe as a voyage to Trip Out City. It's really, really rather cool. Speaking as someone who's never done drugs in any way, shape or form, I completely understand why people like it. Because as the drug took on, there was this wonderful sort of numbing effect as the drug goes into your circulatory system. You can feel it going around your body as it goes through the various, arteries and veins and stuff. You can almost feel it going around, because there's this sort of strange sense of kind of, that's quite nice. It's sort of relaxing. All your muscles go soft, and that's actually good. And then the pain starts to go away, which is obviously very nice. And then it obviously got to my brain at that point, because suddenly, and I remember I was lying in the back of this ambulance, and above me is a fluorescent strip light as the ambulance is taking me to the hospital, and I'm sort of strapped to the table to stop me from falling out around the corner. And all I can see is this strip light. And as I'm looking at this strip light, suddenly it just becomes a rainbow. And it's like, wow, look at that, it's so beautiful. Apparently I was totally away with the fairies by this point, because I was pointing at the light going, wow. The nurse wasn't taking any notice at all, because presumably they're used to this sort of reaction. I was trying to, apparently, she said it was very interesting. She said I was trying to explain to her about the different frequencies of light that I was seeing, and I say, well, of course the red end of the spectrum is only so many nanometers, and the blue end, well, that's the higher frequency light. It's much more interesting. Don't want to go any higher than that because it's ultraviolet. I was doing this for about 10 minutes, and I have no idea what I said because I was away, but I do remember the utter euphoria of having this drug in my system, and it was very, very disappointing when it wore off. It was like quite sad. So I completely began to appreciate the whole withdrawal symptoms from having a drug experience like that, and that gave me a newfound kind of appreciation again for drugs and what they do to you. So things like that can be useful in writing to kind of further your experiences. So if you've had a weird experience, then capitalise on it and remind yourself of it and write some notes down. Drew is sounding like my mum explaining episodes of the A-Team when I was a kid. I heard someone, yeah. Those are funny, but they just crash into the side of a cliff, and the helicopter crashes to the floor, bursts into flame, and they all stagger out going, ow, ow, ow. Glenn, in the story from Nine Streams of Consciousness where the captain wakes up from stasis, I used an experience where I woke and my arm had fallen asleep and I was numb and lifted it to wipe my eyes, basically hit myself on the face. Yes, you can do that, can't you? Have you ever done the one where you're sitting down and your leg's actually gone to sleep but you haven't realised it and you get up? and start walking normally, and then about 6 or 7 steps into that normal walking process, suddenly your leg goes, by the way, I haven't had any blood for the last 10 minutes. And then suddenly, zing, and you can't walk, and you're sort of staggering around like a zombie. That's not a good thing. Karumba says, I remember waking up in an MRI scanner on morphine and mumbling about hula hoops, trying to inquire about my it does some very strange. Apparently, the nurses and doctors say it's very, very interesting because the drugs do tend to give you a shortcut into to the people in the strange workings of people's brains, and some people will say quite unusual things under the influence of drugs. Apparently, my explanation of electromagnetic radiation was, she said, it's one of the more scientific ones we've had, let's say. Which was quite reassuring, actually. So there we go. You're a wizard, yes, exactly right. So after surgery once, I was given codeine to take home. I was in pain, so I took some, absolutely messed me up and everything. Yeah, so some things are you can have weird reactions to drugs. So don't experiment, kids. Okay, yeah, don't experiment. But that was just some experiences I had. But there we go. Anyway, so there we go. Right. Enough waffle. What is the topic now? You completely bypassed me last week, and I'm very proud of your achievements in stopping me actually getting even anywhere near the topic of the day last week. So now I've got 2 topics, but we'll do one because doing 2 topics in one evening would be very nutty. Ha ha ha. There are lots of videos of kids coming home from having wisdom teeth pulled, and the drugs have them in a very emotional state. Very weird. Yeah. So. My favourite one actually is quite often, I don't know if this happens in the States, but in the UK it's fairly common at sort of harvest time, is that if you've got a lot of apple trees on the edge of farms and things, that the animals eat the apples that have fallen from the trees, but quite often they've fermented, so they're actually alcoholic, and so if the animals eat too many of these things, basically they get drunk, and you get some farmyard animals staggering around trying to figure out why their legs don't work anymore. 2 topics, one to talk about, one to eat. Exactly. JL19, got the joke. Well done. So that's fermented apples can be quite amusing, which I presume is a fairly natural phenomenon. I don't know. You see all these drunk animals wandering around, which is quite amusing. True, I have something to say. Glenn laughs. You know about it here. Reindeer eat agaric mushrooms and trip out. Do they? Excellent. Yeah, drunk critters. Drunk critters are fun. So anyway, so the topic was for last week, and on a science fiction event, and we need to do a bit more fantasy at some point. But this one was a science fiction one, so I'll try and do a fantasy topic next week for those of you who are into your fantasy. But tonight was the unusual topic of user interfaces. It doesn't sound all that interesting, I have to admit, but I think it's quite an interesting one. User interfaces in science fiction, because cast your mind back to ye olde science fiction. I don't know, I suppose stuff that I'm thinking of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Flash Gordon's rocket ships and the original Buck Rogers and all that sort of stuff. Everything. Drew gets to his topic. Yay! Everything was switches. Now I would have been very much at home in those days because I like switches. Okay, so it's kind of and the Batman stuff. Ignition coils on, turbines to speed, and all that sort of stuff. It's click, 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 turn the dial. I like dials and clicky turny things, and oscilloscopes and stuff like that, and tuning dials, all that sort of stuff. It's M1K3TV is a UI designer by. So that whole thing about what does the inside of a spaceship look like? So back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, a high-tech spaceship clearly had to have loads and loads of switches. And the old thing about when and it's in most of the early TV movies about airplanes as well, is that whole thing about when you first see an airplane cockpit, it is just the old airplanes now, they're festooned by thousands and thousands of gauges and switches and knobs and dials and things. It's just overwhelmingly complicated. It's like, and if you look at the inside of the Apollo capsules, the Gemini capsules, all of that sort of stuff, it's all switches, all physical switches that do a thing. Yeah, and you have a gauge. the thing I love about gauges is that you have to tap them. Have you noticed that? In all the movies, when they're basically going, oh look, the fuel gauge isn't reading right, or the fuel gauge is reading low. The guy will always go like that. And then sometimes on the movies, magically the gauge will go, no, you're right, actually. No, there is half a tank of fuel in there after all. It's not actually running on empty. It's such an overused cliche. And then in one case, I do know that a physical gauge can get stuck. But I have tried my entire life to date. And I've got at my, those of you who see my house, I have a collection of barometers and clocks and all sorts of stupidly pointless measuring devices. Because of course you can get all these measurements far easier by just looking them up on the internet. But that's not the fun, is it? And I've got dial. If you've ever seen any of my old cars, they've all got dials, and I religiously tap the dials in the cars, and the barometers and things, and I have never once yet have any of the dials go, you know what, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm going to move. It just hasn't happened to me yet. One day it will, and I go, ha, it is worth tapping the dials. A big 39G, tapping the gauge to get the reading you want. Yeah. So I'm not punching the dial hard enough. Yeah. So, but there is a, of course, nowadays it's absolute nostalgia for that sort of technology. Is the fact that these gauges, and if you know how the gauges work, I mean, obviously they're all different things. The altimeter gauge is like a little geared thing that spins around, which is the only purpose, by the way, of an altimeter gauge is to spin really rapidly to show you're about to crash. That's what an altimeter gauge is for. The temperature gauge is only there to basically go into the red zone to know that whatever it is that you're in is about to explode. And the RPM gauge, the one that tells you how fast your engine is going, is only there to show that you're really pushing the engine really, really hard and something is about to let go in a spectacular way fairly soon. Okay, so the gauges are actually, certainly for TV and film, are a really, really good way of getting some tension, because you can say, right, well, clearly whatever it is that we're clearly pushing it too hard, or it's about to crash, because the gauges are doing their thing. It's like, how long can it stay in the red zone? So I like gauges because I think they're an excellent thing. I watch the movie Airplane. Yeah, that's got some fantastic stuff in it. Along with the is it Airplane where he goes, that's strange? And there's a light on the dashboard which basically just flashes red and says the word strange. It's just, yep, that's my sense of humour. So Flash Gordon Buck Rogers mid 19th, a bit earlier. I mean, they're black and white. I did watch one the other day just because I have fond memories of watching them as a kid on Saturdays. Obviously they're really dreadful by modern day standards, but the storytelling is actually quite good. But they're a product of their time, clearly. But the inside of a spaceship is very much, I suppose, a product of the era that you're in, pushed forward a little bit, because it's interesting to look at the insides of spaceships in each generation. So in the 1930s and sort of 40s into the 50s, everything was sort of, I suppose, 10 years advanced, high tech. So there were lots of flashing lights. Have you noticed? And even that persisted into the 70s, actually. Flashing lights. You'd have computers, or so-called computers in the sci-fi environments that were just lots and lots and lots of lights. And then you get the computer or whatever it was to do a thing, like, scan for life forms or compute the possibility of an XYZ happening, and there'd be thousands of lights just flickering on and off in a random fashion. You're kind of going, and I just accepted it at the time. But I remember my dad going, "That's not what a computer looks like, son." I mean, yeah, but it's a computer that looks like a space computer. It's obviously like super high tech. It's like my dad had obviously spotted the. So how do you work out what the thing is actually telling you then? Because it's like It's a brilliant constellation of bright, sparkly lights. It's not the best user interface for the world, is it? Because what does it tell you? So all that sort of stuff. So that I remember, lots and lots of flashing lights. But earlier than that, it was all gauges and switches, which I suppose was sort of okay. Well, what's in current airplanes? Let's kind of do some of that, because clearly spaceships are more complicated than airplanes. So if we make our spaceship look kind of super airplaney, then that's kind of high tech, isn't it? So that's clearly what spaceships will be like in the future is lots and lots of gauges and dials and flashy lights. So you can kind of see the thinking. And then the one that I suppose some of them I'm thinking of things like Forbidden Planet, where they have a sort of console thing, and actually there's a small nod to some sort of thought in Forbidden Planet, because there's a model of the spaceship inside a sort of sphere with some graduated numbers, I think degrees around the edges, which sort of gives you a sense of the orientation of the ship perhaps in space. Not quite sure how that works out, but that was some thought had gone into that. Alienware tape cassette recorder, yeah. Isaac Asimov in his far future security feeds use photographic film that needs developing before. Yeah, see, that's one thing that a lot of science fiction writers didn't get right, was it? Is the idea of film. I mean, Star Trek, the original Star Trek, there are, I believe, I think I'm right in saying, there are a few places where there's a printer, a very small, sort of, I don't know, like a dot matrix printer that prints out a small ribbon of tape, and Spock rips it off and reads it. Pretty sure you weren't near one of those in the 23rd century. The computer output is on paper, which is just quite funny to watch now. So there's hits and misses there. Photographic film and photographic plates and things, of course, were so just part of the furniture of normal life that it was probably quite hard to sort of see where they were going and how suddenly they would disappear from society because something better had come along. Quite hard to see that. It's hard to put yourself back in the 60s and 70s when these people were writing that sort of science fiction to go, actually that technology is just gonna die. It's going to be gone. It's there in the next gen as well. Yeah, happy book ride. You'll say that now, but when all the screens go down, you see, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, that's another angle on it. But so user interfaces. I mean, there was this period of gauges and dials and switches, which I must admit, I quite like. And it was actually, there's a lovely episode of Star Trek Voyager where I can't remember the pilot's name. Who's the chap who pilots the ship in Star Trek Voyager? Anyway, that guy, Lieutenant something, who basically kits out the ship with gauges and switches because he doesn't like touchscreen interfaces. I was like, yeah, go for it, man. So Paris, yeah, Tom Paris, that's right, Tom Paris, yeah. So that was quite good, so that, yeah, so I get that there is a whole thing, and it's interesting actually. Here in the UK, I don't know if this is the same worldwide, but we're getting cars now where there are literally almost no switches in them at all. They're all touch screen. Everything in the car, the heater controls, the stereo, everything is just a touch screen. Because presumably it's cheaper to make. And you're getting to the point where the tactile response to turning a dial is becoming a thing of the past, which I personally don't like. I much prefer to have things I can switch on and off. And I think I was talking a few months ago about when was the last time you bought a gadget that actually had an off switch, so you could actually interrupt the power to it and it genuinely was off. It couldn't switch itself back on. They just don't exist. They're very, very rare now. Yeah. I was always amazed that they had touch screens that would not be set off when the crew fell against them during a So this is the thing. This is interesting. So going back. Okay, so into the 60s, we start having some screens appearing. So I'm beginning to think of the original Star Trek again, which we always end up on Star Trek at some point talking about this sort of stuff. They've still got switches. Okay, now they're switches on Star Trek, I think, are quite interesting because in the original series, the consoles are full of multicoloured switches. None of them are labelled. So you must go through a very, very, very extensive training course to be able to use those consoles, because there aren't any labels on any of them. You know, there's switches, there's little lighty up buttons, and all sorts of things. And there was a little mechanical clock on one episode I spotted at once, one of the early ones, where you can see the digits rolling because they're mechanical. It sounded like a quaint thing to have on a 23rd century starship. But you know, they've got no obvious QWERTY keyboard layout. That's clearly gone. So yeah, it's just a collection of lighting up buttons that you jab and press and switch things. Spock has that blue visory thing, which I assume is obviously just a prop with a blue light in it. But you kind of you assume that he's looking at some sort of display. For some reason, it has to be like a microscope. I don't know quite why, but you know. He's got like a little windy thing on the side, which is presumably some sort of selector knob or something like that. So you have to act, and it's presumably just a blue light shining in his face. But you know, stuff like that. You know, the design ethics of that. Still got physical switches and buttons. And then in the screens above them, have you noticed in the original Star Trek, there's vision screens which they do occasionally use to transmit information. So that was quite thoughtful. And when they're sort of off in sort of screensaver mode, they show nice space pictures of things from Earth, which is obviously quite comforting. You know, some nice sort of starscapes and things like that. So so that's how it begins to evolve. J.R. in my novella, the ship has physical redundancies which come in handy when the holographic interfaces go down. And the big red button that is labelled "Do Not Press." So that's quite interesting. It's interesting to watch what goes from Star Trek to the Next Generation, because in the Next Generation everything has become a touchscreen. There are no buttons at all anywhere, as far pretty much, other than some of the sort of portable laptop things they have seem to have a couple of selector buttons, but most of them are touchscreen by this point. And of course, in 1988, touchscreen devices there were a few of them about. I'm thinking things like the early Apple Newton and the Palm Pilot, Palm Professional things. But they were generally stylus based rather than fingerprint based, and they obviously weren't full colour back then. So those sort of things were still in the future, but not really all that far into the future. And it didn't take long for real technology to overtake what was portrayed in the Next Generation in terms of kind of user interface design. So that was quite. So looking at the Next Generation now, at the time it looked pretty kind of, ooh yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah, looking at it now, it looks looks awfully clumsy and quite low res. So that's interesting. And then of course now, if you watch any sci-fi show nowadays, everything is holograms, freestanding holograms. So there's all this. I mean, I think it first appeared with sort of Minority Report is the first, the Tom Cruise movie. That's the first time I kind of recall seeing it, although it obviously been in science fiction beforehand. Whereas you sort of gesture at space, and you can spin things and move them in and out, and you're going no, I don't want that bit, I want this bit, and move that in and resize it, and somehow the computer figures out what you're trying to do. And they say no, that one. Tick, shove off, or email, that sort of stuff. And I first remember seeing that in Minority Report and things like that. The Newton was released in '93. I thought that was earlier than that. Interesting. Okay, maybe I'm getting my 90s mixed up. And Star Wars holograms. That's true, Commander O'Connor. So Star Wars had that much sort of almost fax-like, didn't it, sort of quality to the holograms. That's very true, actually. The holograms were in Star Wars much earlier than that. But they're not really user interfaces in Star Wars, are they? They're sort of communication technology, I suppose. But it's a good point. That's a good point. I'd forgotten about that. In fact, in Star Wars, most of the user interfaces are, again, a bit more like the Star Trek original series, there's lots and lots of buttons and lights, but then none of them are labelled. There's no obvious keyboards, just a bunch of switches and lights and designs and things. The Millennium Falcon has various levers and lots of lights, things that you have to hit to make the lights come on, because it's not very reliable. There's a mix there of screens and things, but you're quite right, the holograms appear. But then, modern science fiction has holograms all over the shop now. I'm just thinking of the revised Picard Star Trek series, all holograms. All hologrammatic user interface, and you just get to wave your hands around, which I suppose in some ways makes the set design easier because you can just do it in CGI. And Darth uses 3D controls to force choke people on other ships. Yeah, I suppose he does. But I'm curious about user interface here because the one thing I would have a problem with I suppose touch screens and hologrammatic screens in environments where things can quite easily get damaged, space combat and stuff. I suppose a good thing about switches and things like that is they can kind of easily be repaired. Or if one of the gauges doesn't work, then you can first you can tap it to make sure it's actually possibly thing, or you can still control the ship because you've still got some actual physical things. Whereas if you've got problems with your computer display and your holograms and stuff, it'd be quite, if your ship experiences a catastrophic shutdown of its computer processing capabilities, suddenly you've got no user interface at all, and thus you've got no control over your spaceship. But it's interesting to see how that's developed, because if you looked at the Dragon SpaceX Crew module, that was all touch screens as well. And I remember thinking, it's an interesting choice to have the ship controls all based on touch screens. I mean, it gives you presumably a lot more flexibility in the things that you can access and do. But maybe I'm just too old-fashioned. I just want some switches, because that's definitely on. I can see a light. It's definitely there. A hyperdrive that needs a kick to get it going, not the most practical. No, I suppose that's true. But so I don't know. Do you think? I mean, freestanding. I'd like to have freestanding holograms. I think that would be very cool. I'm not actually aware of any real technology that can do that. Does anybody know? Is that something that's in a lab somewhere where somebody's trying to make? Because I can't see how it works. I mean, how do you project an image into the air that you can see without a painting? I mean, I understand how a hologram works, looking through a piece of glass, but to actually have a freestanding one that doesn't require any projection, that's a different thing. I mean, you obviously you can simulate it with VR, but nobody wears. I mean, obviously Geordie wears his visor, but nobody else wears a visor, do they? So is there any way to do that that's even theoretically possible? I think the kicking thing adds to the charm. Yeah. Well, you've got your machine. In that case, the Millennium Falcon has to be a sort of character in the story of itself. It's slightly unreliable old, scrapyard kind of ship, which is good. Zebra says yes, they use mist. Okay, so you have to fill your room up with fog, and then you can project into it. I suppose that makes sense. But of the sort of things that we see on most sci-fi, the holograms appear to be freestanding. They're sort of just transmitted into the air in some fashion, aren't they? And I'm pretty sure light doesn't do that. It's like the lightsabers. You can't tell them to stop at a certain point in time. But mist, I suppose, sort of works. I did read an article about someone working on a very rudimentary 3D image that does not require something that projects it onto. I would like to see that, because freestanding holograms would be a very cool thing to see. But I'm not convinced it's necessarily the best UI, because it depends on how your ship is built. I suppose if your ship doesn't have glass windows, which of course we've discussed that before, that glass windows on the spaceship are a very, very bad idea. Assuming you've got decent camera, kind of remote telesensing capabilities on your spaceship, you wouldn't put a window on it, because it's deliberately making it very, very weak at one critical point on the ship. So here's the bridge, shoot at this. JL19 has found a link there. Scientific delegate hologram expert can now create real life images that move in the air like a 3D printer for light. Wow, I'm gonna have to click on the link. I don't normally recommend people clicking on links, but there we go, clicking on links. So holograms, that actually does look quite cool. So in fact, the blurb. Let me switch it to full screen plus camera so you can see what I'm looking at. So a tiny Starship Enterprise fires on a tiny Klingon battlecruiser with real animated images created in thin air. So how does it work? Inspired by the displays of science fiction. Oh, there's actually a video. Let's just have a quick. This will work on my screen.
Here at BYU in the holography.
Let's cancel the sound just so we can watch. So actually, yeah. So the how's that even a thing? I mean, it's so they are creating images in freestanding space. Somehow, I don't know how that's working. It's rapid light movement, but what's it bouncing off in order to get to your eyes? So I mean, if they can do it with great big clunky hardware now, again, in a few years' time, they'll turn it into a miniaturized thing. So so maybe it is coming. So maybe that's it's magic. Look at that. I mean, there you go. It's very, very small right now by the look of that, but yeah, they're working on it. So if they can do it small, it's maybe just an application of doing clever stuff and making it bigger. So it's I don't know, optical trap displays. They're created by trapping a single particle in the air with a laser beam and then moving that particle around, leaving behind a laser illuminated path that floats in midair. Wow. I have I have no idea how that works. so maybe that tech is coming. Maybe that tech. I mean, it's obviously, it sounds like quite a complicated thing to do, but maybe that is coming. Maybe freestanding holograms are going to be a thing. But is it the right interface for a spaceship to have spinny things that are floating in the air? We've talked in the past about the best writing environment, and I've still got, as you can see, a quite an old clunky Microsoft keyboard that I use. That's what I use to write with, and I still use a mouse because there isn't another technology that I can use that is more efficient. So at least at the moment. Now I could maybe text to speech, speech to text technology would get better. But it's not good enough at the moment to replace a keyboard. And actually, probably for writing, speaking out loud actually isn't the best way to get your novel out necessarily. I suppose maybe you could get used to it, but I find typing it out actually helps me express myself. So I don't know. And Tracy Thompson says, I think you need haptic feedback. So yes, so there's a visceral sense of and even touchscreen devices like phones now, they do it. When you press something and hold it, it sort of buzzes the phone, doesn't it? So you've done it. And when you hit a keyboard, you know you've typed because you can feel it. That exactly that haptic feedback. Whereas jabbing things in space, I mean, I can't imagine typing in on a holographic keyboard. I don't know. Would that work? Maybe you could get used to. I don't know, I'm going to put my fingers up here. There we go. Or maybe you could get, but that feels horrible. I need to touch something. So I don't know if that works, and it depends on navigating a spaceship and switching things on. Maybe big buttons, big hologrammatic things. I don't know. That whole UI thing of what should the inside of a spaceship actually look like. In the far distant future is an interesting one. Idea has been around for a while, so if we think we work on it, then that's teleportation in the 90s in Germany. I don't know how far along it is now. So so there's lots of weird technology that's sort of kicking about, isn't it? I've done that mid-air typing one in VR, and it's weird as hell and not accurate. Okay, so that maybe the technology can improve a bit, but it doesn't feel like a natural thing, does it? I wouldn't like to dictate a book. The tendency to waffle around would be too great. be watching my streams, haven't you? So yeah, so I think that's the thing. They need holograms that can simulate resistance and touch. Is that, that's starting to get even more tricky because there's nothing here in space, is there? You'd have to project a force field, which again is another sort of pretty much impossible thing. Yes, JR90 is that's perfect. Yeah, Captain's log, stardate. Oh crap! I just stubbed my toe. Ouch! Wait, no, go! Don't record that. Stop! Don't record that. No, go back. Delete. That's what everything's going to look like. But things do change. And going back to right at the beginning of this, the thing about science fiction writers in the 60s and 70s talking about photographic film, because photographic film was just a staple. Clearly cameras are going to be around. Clearly we're going to take pictures of things. So photographs, and even one would hope slightly visionary people. Now, let's go back to Elite for a moment. The 1993 and 1995 games of Elite, First Encounters and Frontier. Elite 2, Frontier Elite 2 and Frontier First Encounters. You have to take photographs, and I stress the word photograph, of sites of interest, nuclear bunkers and stuff in the game, by clicking a camera icon, and the game comes back with photograph taken, as if slung underneath the body of this 34th century ship is like a Polaroid camera. You have to wind on to the next frame, and it's interesting. I mean, and I certainly didn't spot it, and I'm sure many of you didn't if you lived through those times. Suddenly that film photography would, within a few relatively short years, would suddenly just not be there anymore for the vast majority of people, and certainly my children have never used a film camera. Why would they? Actually, my eldest son has. He did study photography a while, so he understood some of the principles of developing of things. But for practical usage, no. And I can't remember the last time I shot a roll of film. It's a long time ago now. So for something that was utterly mainstream to have just virtually vanished. And the same thing is, you see in Star Trek as well, things like the library computer tapes. as if tape, and I must admit, my wife and we notice this in conversation every so often. We still say when we record something on the TV, of course we're not really recording it, we're just time shifting it nowadays. We still say, we'll stick that on tape. There's been any tape in there 2 decades, but it will tape it. Tape it or watch it later. We still say that because that's what we did back in the day, but we're not actually taping things anymore. But taping it is basically our way of saying we've recorded it for later. Or actually, we haven't recorded it either. We've just reminded ourselves that we won't watch it now. We've taped that. And our kids are going, So there's odd things like that which do show up in older science fiction as things that just aren't there anymore. I used to be very miffed because when I was a kid growing up in the 70s, I would see computer rooms full of flashing lights and reel-to-reel tape players and things like that. Okay, remember the computers in those old science fiction shows? There was always a bank of computers somewhere with big reel-to-reel cassette things spinning around furiously, loading really important stuff from computer tape and all that sort of stuff. And of course, by the time I got into actually working on computers in the late 80s, that had all gone. Computers were really boring green screen things, and then later PCs, which were all the flashing lights and all the interesting displays, and the big spinning things of tape, all gone. So it's like I felt quite shortchanged that all that stuff had disappeared. But the stuff that I, of course, used is also gone now. I was in an era of cassette tape early on, and then floppy disks. Who remembers floppy disks? So floppy disks were just a technology that it was just there. You didn't suddenly expect it to not be there. And then one day I just remembered thinking, it was the last time I used a floppy disk. I just realised you just hadn't, because they were gone. And they're obviously of no use whatsoever because they were too small. using the pencil to rewind. So there was a thing a while back about how rather underwhelming data processing power really is. Yeah, so some stuff moves on remarkably quickly. MP3 players came into their own before streaming services came around and became normal. So all that sort of stuff, is moving so fast in the real world that science, I think science fiction sometimes struggles to stay ahead of it. I mean, you look at the tricorder in the Next Generation. In fact, even in the original series, they had the idea of a tricorder, and then in the Next Generation, they had one as well with a flipped lid, little interface, and it looks so old-fashioned now. It's like, well, I'd much rather have an iPad. And then in the later stuff, then they do have iPad-y type things, don't they? And I notice in the next in Elite, again going back to Elite Dangerous, in the concourses, the people all have kind of iPad-y type things, and I'm presuming they're doing something. They're just sitting there, most of them just tapping away on their screen, and everything is either a flat screen, or it's a sort of hologram thing. There's no other user interface anybody's imagined yet. And of course, if you really think about it, if we've got flat screens now, and let's say we've got full screen, standalone holograms, maybe 20, 30 years, or possibly even sooner in the future, by the 23rd or 24th century or the 34th century, whatever it happens to be, the chance of that technology still being in use is utterly ridiculous. It's like using, stone tablets now, because it's just ridiculous. So what are the user interfaces going to be? I think it's going to go far more down the way of human interface to computer augmentation. So I think ultimately it's going to start off. We kind of went there a bit with Google Glasses. Who remembers them? Where you can have a pair of glasses and you can overlay information. I think that's going to come back and have its day at some point in time, because I think that would potentially be quite a useful thing to have. And then maybe it gets miniaturized down to contact lenses, and then that sort of enhanced reality where a computer projection is overlaid on top of actual reality in such a way that it's kind of context sensitive, so you can look at something and the computer will identify it, and you'll see in your visual field a user interface which isn't actually physically there, but as far as you're concerned, because it's focused in your line of sight, you can see it. And then, by the wonders of networking and stuff, it'll be able to connect to somebody else's visual field, and you'll both be able to share the virtual experience of something that's actually not really there, but you can both see it, and it kind of, once the technology is perfected, it's indistinguishable from reality. So so all that sort of things. So that's where I think it's going to go. I think the era of touch screens and all that sort of stuff is just going to be another 10, 15, 20 year kind of evolution of things. We're going to get higher resolution, more capability, better quality screens, and so on and so on and so forth. But I think at some point it's going to go back to an interface with us, and then we're back to that whole kind of Borg discussion, aren't we? Is how far does that interface go before it kind of takes over? Because if you think about it, if you can project information directly into the retina, or possibly even bypass the retina and go just directly to the optic nerve, straight into wiring your computer straight into your brain, then you don't need to muck about with all this technological complexity of how does the VR environment actually work. You just work out what the image is and send it directly into the brain. Which sounds a bit scary, but if you could relay information directly into the brain of a ship's pilot, or any other job that exists in the future scientific world, I think that's much more likely that that's how we're going to collaborate in the future. The only problem is it's going to drive us insane, because it'd be like having Twitter, Facebook, forums, Reddit, YouTube, all basically being beamed into our brain 24/7. Sounds like a nightmare. Implants that replace the cornea, that sort of thing, I think that's a much more likely direction for us to go to. So rather than all this actual external technology, which I think is going to be quite hard to make work. Daydream will just get pop-up ads. That's right. So I think it would be quite a scary world in some ways, because you'd be looking at thinking, saying, that phone that you're looking at there, you've had that for 3 years, isn't it time you bought a new one? All these ads appearing in your screen. It's like, you just want to rip all your eyes out. How 3.5-inch floppy disks are still being used as save icons. I know, isn't that weird? Neural interfaces are described in maybe cyber. So the cyberpunk idea is I think much more likely the way it's going to go. Medical tech would need to improve for smart contact lenses to work for me. So I mean, there's all sorts of technological hurdles to overcome, but technological hurdles get overcome surprisingly quickly, don't they? Unless it's nuclear fusion, in which case it's always 10 years away. So we all become. I think that's actually going to be one of the things that humanity is probably going to have to wrestle with, assuming we survive all the challenges that we've got just generally existing normally. I think the singularity we're heading towards, when we can project computer-generated imagery or entire sensory perception, let's put hearing and scent and smell and all those sort of things and touch directly into our brains by some sort of interface. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting point for humanity, because you've got a number of things that happen there. One, you've got very, very quick access to virtually everything that you could possibly need to know about anything. And there's also the suspension of actual reality that happens at that point. So, we've joked on this stream before that if anybody does invent a Star Trek holodeck, many of us, if we're honest, would probably never ever come out again. We'd either starve to death. It's a very seductive and dangerous technology. And I think if you've got a technology that can beam a computer-generated fantasy reality, what do you call it, directly into your brain, which effectively short circuits your actual senses, that becomes reality to you, surely. Because how would you know? And that could be subverted quite, in all sorts of ways to do stuff. I mean, there's a sci-fi novel there. Welcome to the Matrix. Exactly it. Welcome to the Matrix. I mean, the Matrix, I think, is a science fiction show which is very much that. I don't think the computers will take over and use us as batteries, because there's far easier ways to generate power. But I think that sort of interface into us could be used to control the population in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways. To what end, I'm not sure. I suppose, and you could say the internet kind of does it now. One of the things I did notice, I did have a friend who's got a very young child, and they've been using an iPad since they've had the ability to look at things, and I noticed that the child picked up an old as in recently printed magazine, and was swiping the pages and was confused that the page didn't scroll to the left or scroll to the right because of the swipe. And so they've just got that instinctive, that's how you get to the next thing, you just use your finger to swipe across, and it, being a piece of paper, it didn't respond. So that sort of, we are slowly changing the native way that people access information. I think that's quite good. Gorfic Star Shadow, hello, so good to see you. Everything is always good. So the danger of immersive VR was covered in. So that's right. So even in a funny science fiction like Red Dwarf, the immersive VR, the better than life game. I mean, that's another one that I just what would. So it's a good question for us all to answer. Is if so for those of you who don't know that particular episode, the proposition is that the better than life game can plug into your brain, obviously completely take over your senses, but in addition to that, it can sort of scan your subconscious, work out what you most desire, and then slowly drip feed that into your experience. So So you go into the game thinking, I'll just have a quick go at the game, and then things happen in the game which just make you think, well, that was good. I'm just gonna stay here and see how that works out. And it basically the game is super hyper addictive, and you can never leave because you become dependent on this sort of, you know, it's just like, because your life is getting better incrementally all the time the longer you stay in the game. And of course, in the real physical world, your body is slowly wasting away, but you don't realise this because you're subverted by the game. And so it's a very, very interesting thing. Could something like that actually happen to us? A couple of a couple of times I have looked at the small picture in the magazine and tried to pinch zoom on the physical page. So so that stuff is changing our behaviour slowly. Real marriages have broken up over affairs and Second Life. So the internet is doing things. Chris fucking haven't watched Red Dwarf in ages, but I remember an episode in which Crichton had to interrupt a tea party with a big tank to get people. That's a brilliant episode. Anybody else unclear to the supper situation? I think he basically goes into a Jane Austen novel with a World War II tank, which of course is something that we'd all like to do, really. So that I think is a genuine concern. But I think I would hazard a guess that is where the future of user interfaces is going. That we're just, it's going to be USB F or something, or Z. We're on C at the moment, aren't we? It's going to be a few iterations down the line, but at some point there's going to be an interface that probably wireless, maybe you wear it around your ear, or it's just a microchip that's implanted in you, and your computer can then wirelessly send information directly into your brain. Maybe in the form of a text overlay or some sort of screen, or maybe I'm just gonna watch a YouTube video now, and then zip, it's in front of your face, and everyone will be zoned out watching YouTube videos. The way people are zoned out on their phones. You see it all the time nowadays. I must admit, when I'm out and about nowadays, I make a conscious effort to not look at my phone, because what I notice is how much everybody is looking at their phones all the time. I mean, my wife and I go for a dog walk at what time do we go? It's quite early, normally about sort of 7 o'clock in the morning. We go for a dog walk, okay, and normally it's when it's not chucking it down with rain, it's quite pleasant. The birds are doing their thing, and the sun's come up, and the breeze is blowing, and the trees are doing their thing, and there's a few animals bouncing around. And which is it's nice to take the dog for a walk and get some fresh air. But the number of people, dog walkers included, who are walking around on their phone, they're like that all the time. And if you go into any public space nowadays, it's like there's a kind of an eclipse going on. People are just look at my small magic box. I mean, it's so prevalent. It's like they're things could explode in the heavens above and nobody would notice because it's just kind of glued to this magic box. Look at my magic box. And then and they're pinching it and doing the things and scrolling and moving this display up and down, all that kind of good stuff. And it is I've got another Facebook like. Who's liked my stuff? 6 YouTube video views today rather than 4. I just got to check where I am with my all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure there's some psychological studies and things of addiction, but just the number of people. And if you physically stop yourself and just go into a public area, like a train station or a bus stop, or just a high street somewhere, your main shopping mall, wherever it happens to be, and just look around you at the people and how they use their phones. It's actually quite scary. Cell phone zombies, I call them. It's a printing always be USB-C because we could have had the C for cerebellum. Will it have British English or US English spellings? Well, of course, British English. I mean, that's the only correct answer to that one. We know that. So I mean, they're very good devices. I mean, I was just cataloguing to myself today. How many things that I used to have, which this now does. So video camcorder. Nope, phone does that. Torch. Nope, phone does that. Phone, obviously the phone does that. Camera, I just use this now. I mean, I've got a lovely down here. and I still like it. I've got a nice digital SLR, but I take more photos on my phone now, because I carry my phone with me. And don't carry the SLR. Video camera. I've already mentioned. Email. The phone does that. Web browsing. Phone does that. Playing music. My Walkman. Nope. Phone does that. Everything is done by the phone. And when the neuro gadget is invented, whatever it is, that ability to beam that stuff directly into your head, it'll be a limited context to start with. I think it's going to be very, very, very compelling for people. I'm just going to look up, and you rather than phone zombies, you're just going to have people going, sort of staring into the middle distance, going, "I'm watching YouTube." You'll see them wandering around, and you'll be able to go, "Hello, I'm in the real world," and then we go, "No, I'm watching YouTube." It's it's going to be very odd. I've watched people bumping. I had to rescue a woman from being run over by a car once in London, because she was on her phone and she literally stepped out into traffic, and I had to grab her and pull her back off. And she, for a moment, she thought I was. I don't know what she thought I was going to do. Thought I was kind of ambushing her, because she got, "What are you doing?" I said, "Look, you just stepped out into the traffic. I've just saved your life," probably. And then she sort of snapped out of it and realised what had happened, and she was kind of thankful. But for a moment, her instant reaction was, "Why the hell are you grabbing me?" Because I'm on my phone. It was very, very odd. And it's like, your instinct for self-preservation has been completely subsumed by this little small square box. Chris Viking says, I'm the generation that was sent out into the woods with a paper map in a sealed plastic folder and a compass and expected to clip my car. Yep, I've been there. We used to do that at Boy Scouts. That was good fun. Connor, I can remember the phone number from when I was a teen, and those are my friends now without my phone. I can't remember phone numbers today. I can remember mine because I have to write it down every so often. My home phone number when I was a kid was literally 3 figures. It was 551. If you wanted to dial anything out, and they've changed it. They've adopted it over time. Because I lived in a village, we had a telephone exchange with only a few hundred people, so 3 figures was all you wanted. If you wanted to dial the town, you had to prefix it with 72, and then if you wanted to dial beyond your county, you had to prefix it with 233. And then eventually they standardised all these numbers and gave us the sort of in the UK we now have 11-figure telephone numbers. So we have a dialing code and then the actual specific code, 6-figure number that it identifies you. But it wasn't all that like back then. So dial them out. Just let them die. As tech advances, we rely on it more, and because that's the thing that I kind of worry about with this whole singularity business is so much technology that we use nowadays, we have no idea how it works. As you know, I've got a couple of classic cars which I like fiddling with, and given replacement parts, I can fix them. Okay, so if I can get a replacement part, I can fix them. I can bodge some things on them to keep them running for a period of time, but they are bodges, and then I have to repair them properly. For that, I need proper parts. Whereas on a modern car, no chance. Okay, even if it allows you to open the bonnet, which it quite often doesn't, all you have is a great big plastic cover, and even if you can get that plastic cover off, it's just like, what the hell is all this stuff? It might as well just be a massive, unrecognisable stuff, because you can't fix it. There's nothing you can do as an individual. You need special tools and special equipment and reset things and computer this, that, and the other. You just can't do it. And so so that's having to go. Computers, to a degree, you can fix them if you know what you're doing with various componentry. You can replace components, but none of us could make a graphics card or a chip or anything like that. You just don't have the capability to fabricate something like that. And even if you take it down to something fairly simple, if let's take a toaster. Now it's not too difficult to figure out how a toaster works, but I couldn't make a toaster. Not a safe one anyway. I'd have to resort to cooking my toast over a fire on a stick. That sort of achieves the same effect, and that's how things would have to be. And the other thing that is interesting is I grew up in the countryside, and I've always been an outdoorsy sort of person. So, leave me in a woodland somewhere. I've been on enough courses and things and spent enough time outside that I know how to light a fire from first principles without some matches. And it's not all that easy, but I can do it, and I can start a fire, and therefore I can potentially keep myself warm and cook stuff. But I remember going on, those horrible icebreaker things at certain companies and various things like that. And sometimes you're taken out on these things and given an experience, and the number of people who have no idea how to light a fire. No clue that you have to start small and then build it up with kindling and all that, and then get bigger logs, and so that, just no idea that. Why would I need to know how to start a fire? All that sort of stuff. And on one hand, you don't need to start. You don't need to know how to light a fire, do you? Because you've just switched the heater on and dial in the temperature you want. But come the technological collapse of civilization, then everyone's going to need to. And is that likely? Is it a problem that we don't know how anything works anymore, and we couldn't fix it even if we had to? We can't fix most of the stuff. The vast majority of the stuff that we have. Right to repair. So that I think is a very worthwhile initiative. I like repairing things, and there are certain things in my house that I can repair. The old cars I can repair. The old clocks I can repair. A lot of the old instruments and 70s, 80s electronics I can repair because I know how to do it. But once you get into about the 90s, everything becomes software and microprocessor driven, and it becomes really difficult to fix if it's busted. So that's the thing, and it's only gonna, as we start plugging it into ourselves, I don't know. It might become like the Warhammer 40k, where everyone's forgotten how their advanced stuff works, and they have priests and technomancers to keep stuff going. That I think is quite likely, because we've always had that kind of, those are the techie people who actually know stuff, and then the rest of us just use it. I've always loved maps and had a good sense of direction. I find it really curious as a planet route for my so I can go cycling. Places we had ridden over, and no but myself and a few others remember how to get in or able. So reading a map, very very quaint skill there, Graham. But I like maps. I like reading maps. But most people are just lost without a GPS. The idea of plotting a route and writing down where you're going and having a vague knowledge of the landscape you're going through, to some people is a complete just don't do it. Well, the GPS gets me there. I just follow that. What if the GPS goes wrong, or you run out of batteries? Well, I'm stuck then, aren't I? Yeah, but you can. There's ways to have backup. So, can I repair the hat? Well, yes, you can stitch the. I have got a sewing machine. I could potentially fix the hat if it became damaged. Humanity will perish the day our tech fails. I mean, that does scare me a bit, because so much of our lifestyles is dependent on technology. The whole just-in-time delivery of food, the transport network, all of those things. If part of that stuff breaks down in a bad way, we are totally hosed, aren't we? And no one remembers. We know how to drive cars, but we don't know how to make them. It's the same with generating power. I know the principles, but you can't do it from first principles. One of the things that I really noticed, I spent a few days years ago on a camp where we had no technology at all. It was specifically banned, just so you could kind of get away from it all. And all we had literally was hand tools and bits of fabric and string, and that's it. So you had to make a camp. You had to. We did have some food given to us. We had to cook the food, and we had to make the fires from first principles and all that sort of stuff. So you had to kind of do all that work. The one thing it gave me an absolute appreciation for was how long it takes to do stuff, and how much of your survival is basically an energy war, because when you're out, and even in the UK, it's possible to die of hypothermia, even in relatively pleasant environments. And in many countries, it would be a lot worse than the UK, because we have a very mild climate. One of the things that became very clear is if you don't have a source of heat, you can quickly be in quite a lot of trouble. in sort of a life-threatening sort of way, because and to keep a fire going, obviously you just feed it with logs, right? But those logs have got to come from somewhere, and you've got to cut them down, or you've got to drag them from wherever they are to where your fire is, and you've got to go and forage for things, and bring them back to the camp so they can be cooked, and all that sort of stuff. And all that activity takes energy, which you need to replenish by eating food, which of course you need to cook on a fire, which you need to then get the fire to work, which you need to then have energy so you can go and get the. And it's a constant energy cycle, and the amount of work you have to do just to stay alive and stay warm, when you take the technology away, is really quite eye-opening. You have to work really hard in order to just keep going and have enough energy to do stuff and cook stuff and gather logs and keep things alive and keep things moving, and then go foraging for some water and then boil the water and all that sort of stuff. That actual just process of staying alive and surviving in a non-technological environment is really hard work. Surprisingly enough, and it really brought it back to me how the ability to just turn on the fire or turn on a light, we're so used to that now, and whack the temperature up by a couple of degrees because it's a bit chilly. The amount of energy that actually represents, if you had to go and do that yourself, i.e. go and cut down a tree, turn it into logs, bring that log back again and then set fire to it, you would be amazed by how much energy we consume. Really, it's quite frightening. It really is. Just need to see what happens after a big storm when the power goes out for a Tuesday. Humanity is not far from utter chaos, alas. We've seen that. The COVID thing has shown us how close we can come to some of that sort of stuff. At least steel to strike against some of the sparks. Yeah, so I must admit I have got a steel which allows you to generate the sparks. Skills a kid has these reflection of their parents' skill set and how much time they spend with the children. In my humble opinion, at least. Yeah, so I mean we've kind of brought our kids up to be as self-sufficient as possible, but there are few opportunities to use those skills now. I suppose that's the other thing. It depends where you live and what kind of environment you're in. My nephews all have my survival skills. Their parents too busy and too dumb themselves to everything to pass on. Harsh, but probably fair. So very true. I love that my dad is still around. I have left my son with him for a month to basically absorb all his practical skills and wisdom. Yeah, so that's good, passing on those skills, because those skills are still useful and still relevant, particularly when things start to go wrong. But you've got to train the youth, and the youth have got to have the time to do it as well. Chris Viking, we grew crops out in the countryside when I was younger, and once the tractor wasn't working, so my stepbrother and I pulled us ploughs did by my stepfather to make furrows, potatoes, carrots, dams. I bet that sounds like really hard work. No tech would have to meet Drew and have a waffle around the fire. Yes, well, that's the way to do it. We'd all bring beers and sit around a campfire and tell stories into the wee hours. That would be awesome. So things like that worry me. I mean, I like, from a science fiction writing perspective, that makes for a good post-apocalyptic novel, of course, that sort of stuff, which I do enjoy, those sort of things. What happens when technology collapses? But the flip side, of course, is what happens when technology gets too pervasive and too intrusive, and are we already at that point? With our dependency on mobile phones, because they're so useful. And there's so much of a focusware that everything we do. I mean, I was another example of that. I was really surprised. I mean, I put up these Twitch streams and I put up my YouTube videos and stuff. I tend to think, maybe I'm a bit old school, I tend to think of YouTube as something I watch on the PC. You use a website to go and visit YouTube. But 72%, I checked it this afternoon, 72% of the videos that I produce are watched on mobile phones. And that was actually quite a surprise to me. It's about 23% on PC, 72% on mobile phones, and the rest is just everything else. And I was like, that's, it just shows how, and that's shifted over time quite a bit. People are just consuming everything through their mobile phone. It's become the interface to everything. And if that switches to a direct neural implant, I just think that's the way it's going to go. So, No one remember how to make fire. Yeah, we can't forget how to make fire or beer. I mean, that would be the end of civilization. We always had more eggs than we could possibly use, so we sold them and gave them away. I don't like watching YouTube on my phone, much prefer my laptop. So I think some of this stuff is a generational thing as well. I mean, I had a conversation with a guy at work just a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying, can you send me that thing you were talking about, because I just want to print it out. And he said, you what? I said, I want to print it out. He said, print it out? He said, why do you want to print it out? I said, well, so I've got a copy of it. He said, well, you've got a copy of it, it's on your computer. Yeah, but I can't read it on there. He said, why not? I said, I don't want to read it on the screen, I want to read it on a piece of paper. He said, why? I went, because I like reading on paper. Oh, okay. And he just said, he said, so you've got a printer at home? I said, well, of course I've got a printer at home. Why haven't you got a printer at home? No. Why would I need a printer? I don't print anything out. And then suddenly there was this kind of click in my head. We're talking. There's a generational thing that's happened here. He was less than 25 years old, and he just, why do I need a printer? You know, I don't use any paper. It just doesn't occur to him to have a printer, because why would I print something when it's on my laptop or my phone? Because that's where it is. It's a digital thing. Why would I turn it into an analog thing? And I get what he means, but my generation, so unless it exists on paper, it doesn't really exist. And maybe that's just the way things are. And some people don't have a computer because the phone is good enough. I wonder if printer sales have dropped off. I don't know. I mean, that'd be a good question. Maybe the younger generation just doesn't need printers because, I mean, I must admit, I don't tend to print out images anymore. I tend to print the things I tend to print out mostly are those. Oddly enough, I tend to print out e-tickets and receipts because I like to have proof that I actually had a thing. But it's all online, isn't it? There's a piece of tech that survived from ages, the papyrus to paper. Yeah. I don't like reading. So I don't like reading long things on the computer screen either. No, I find it far easier to study it on. I mean, we had that example in the UK just recently where somebody from the Ministry of Defence, so it would seem, has printed out a PowerPoint presentation onto paper and then left it in a bus stop, containing all sorts of interesting military secrets. Just shows you all you need to know about UK government. But that shows you that there are people in government who have a PowerPoint presentation and they decide to print it out, and then leave it in a briefcase in a bus stop. So I don't know. Is that a generational thing? Maybe it is. But in terms of in terms of going back to the point, in terms of the UI, what do you have as a UI for your 34th century spaceship? Personally, I don't think it's iPads. It's a curiously backwards sci-fi universe that still has people wandering around with touchscreen tablets. 1,000 years from now, that's just silly. It won't be anything like that. What will it be? It's impossible to say. So all those sort of things. All our concepts of what is normal today will be hopelessly antiquated in 1,000 years' time. The idea that, I mean, even physically, we may have completely changed the way our bodies work by that point in time. I mean, maybe the brain itself is just an inefficient organic slushy thing, and that's been replaced by a much, much more efficient computer that just takes over certain functions. I mean, we can augment things already. Maybe we'll super augment things. I think that's a far more likely evolution of things than just having people in sort of spandex wandering around with iPads in the far future. I don't know. What do you think? What do you guys think? So, chat's now talking about socks. You still wear socks? When the world goes completely paperless, I'm going to really regret it in the loo. I proofread things on the screen and on paper. I catch a lot of typos on paper that I miss on screen. Yeah, so that's a thing. I think some of us are just maybe used to text, but I think it's changing. I've noticed the change on the way my content is consumed over the years. I mean, I used to write a blog quite often, and even about a decade ago, my blog would get 4, 5, 6, 10, sometimes more comments on it. As people were reading the blog. And then over the years, they slowly just began to disappear, and to the point where I was writing blogs and there was no obvious, I mean, I could still the tick counter that people were reading them, but there was no interaction at all in a text form. And what would happen is that I would then place the blog article on Twitter and say, I've just written a blog about so and so on Twitter, and then the comments would then appear on Twitter rather than on the blog itself. And then over the years, the shift to video, in Twitch and YouTube, rather than talking about it in a blog, has become far more popular. I have a lot more followers on Twitch and YouTube now than I do on my blog and direct social media interactions, which just seems to be the way things get communicated. It's changing. Is it good change or bad change? I don't know. It's just change, but the way we consume information and the demographics of that, I think, are changing too. So, and what does that mean for a sci-fi novel? Well, I think you've got to look that much further ahead. Maybe if you can think of the technologies which don't have a long lifestyle now. It's a difficult one to work out. All the good science fiction writers of yesteryear didn't see the demise of the photography coming. They didn't see the rise of the mobile phone coming. I mean, a really good example of that, Back to the Future. Excellent film, 1985, okay? They went forward in time to the year 2015. And if you look at the 2015 that they imagined, only from 1985, so only 30 years in the future, what's interesting there is that they got some things right and some things very, very wrong. If you look at the 2015 in Back to the Future, the second film, they've got things like hydrating pizzas and fast food and stuff like that, which is kind of right. Lots and lots of really big monitors and things like that, kind of right. Big emphasis on retro stuff, kind of right. Freestanding holograms, and we still haven't managed that. One of the key things that's missing in the 2015 of Back to the Future is no mobile phones. Nobody's got a mobile phone, which is the one thing I just didn't see coming. And hoverboards, obviously, and flying cars. Where's my flying car? All that sort of stuff. So even at a 30-year interval, which you'd think you had a reasonable chance of predicting what the future was going to look like, couldn't do it accurately. And so there's no way we can predict accurately what the world's going to be like in 30 years' time, let alone 1,000 years from now. So you've just got to, I suppose, follow through on certain things and go and explore what you think might happen. That's the best you can do. Glenn said, I find that typing things on Twitter gets a few responses, post a silly meme and lots of... I know, I sometimes put a lot of effort into some of my tweets and go, this is a tweet that's really going to get the creative juices thinking across thing, and you get like about 5 likes, don't you? And then you stick up some I'm a cat and I'm a cross meme. It's like 60 likes and 17 retweets. It's like, what? I know. It's just really, really weird. The way that some stuff interacts is very, very strange. Very, very strange. Chris Viking, I remember that they are discovered. They gave them crayons at the end of each episode. Rudimentary starts. Yep. No hoverboards. Yeah, so what happened there? No hoverboards. Some engineer in New York City has a hoverboard made using a beefed up FPV drone motors and props. So that would be quite fun. Probably a bit noisy. And I want a Pepsi free. Listen, kid, if you want a Pepsi, you're going to have to pay for it. So that's a great line, isn't it? And Martin, he got a fax. That's right. He gets a fax saying he's fired, doesn't he? And the fax machine was definitely on the way. And, so the fax machine should have been one of those things they saw going. Commander O'Connor, 62, I'm not all that bothered by what happens in 30 years' time. We totally can't come up with it. But maybe you won't, you see. Maybe your consciousness will be stored on a USB stick. Glenn says, you don't even show up on my Twitter feed anymore, Dru-ids. I have to go to your profile. I know, so that's weird, isn't it? Yeah. So you actually have to go and find people. It's weird the way those algorithms work. They're very suspicious, and the way people get their information. So faxes. Yeah, which reminds me of a fun story. And this sounds like one of those apocryphal stories, but it is actually genuinely true. is we had I worked for a very small company early on in my career, and there were only three of us in the company. I was the third person to join, and we shipped some software, and I helped develop the software and test it, and then shipped it out. We shipped it out on CDs and in boxes, with evaluation keys that lasted for a couple of weeks. So the idea that you played around with the software and then you sent it back to us in a box, and so all these sort of things, and then. I remember we used to get faxed orders come in, and people would fax us. So we'd get this fax and we'd go, "Yay, it's got the thing on it. We've earned some money today." But we were we were trying to get this guy. I can't remember where he was from. I think he was somewhere up north. To fax us an order through, and we'd ring him up. And he'd say, "Yeah, just fax us the order through." So I've been trying to fax you. And he says, your fax machine's always engaged. Well, try it now. We'll go off the phone, because of course the phone number and the fax machine at the time were the same thing. We're going to put the phone down now. You fax us. Anyway, 10 minutes would go past. No fax would arrive, and then the chap would ring up again and say, "No, your fax machine's still engaged. No, we haven't been using the phone. I promise you." He says, "Just try it again now." 10 minutes, still no fax. And here we go. He says, he rings up, getting quite cross, thinking it was our fault. There's something wrong with our fax machine. And he said, right, let me read out your number again. So, what's your number? Oh, yes. 1, yes. 4. 4? No, it's a 2. No, our fax number's definitely got a 4 in it. And just get this guy at the end of the phone saying, "Oh, damn. I've been faxing myself all day." Just typed his own number into the fax machine every single time. Wonder why it was engaged. So, yeah, very, very good. Faxes, right. God help the internet if they upload my persona. I don't think that would be good for me either. Microfiche. Oh, microfiche. Microfiche was cool. That's gone, isn't it? The first image of the moon was sent by fax. Yeah, so Nimdash, actually, technically it wasn't sent by fax. It used fax encoding, which is why George Bank was able to, because it was the Russians sent it, and basically they used fax encoding to encrypt them, not encrypt, but to digitize the message, and George Bank intercepted it from the Russian spacecraft, and somebody said that sounds like a fax, listening to it audible, anyway they basically got a fax from the local newspaper, plugged it into effectively the recording thing of Jodrell Bank, played Jodrell Bank's recording of the Russian spaceship into the fax, and the fax printed out a picture of the moon. So they sent this picture of the moon to the newspaper. I think it was the Daily Mail, and they were able to scoop, i.e. publish the Russians' pictures of the moon in a British newspaper before the Russians got them out into their own newspaper. Suffice to say, the Russians weren't best pleased about that. So that's quite an interesting story, that one. So the more you interact with other people, the less Twitter shows you other stuff that you've not interacted with. So Twitter is quite dangerous in those. All social media, I think, is quite dangerous in that regard, because it's filtered by algorithms that you can't predict. So that's weird. I predict that solicitors firms in the future will be using fax machines because they all are still doing it now. Yeah. So one of the first images from Mars was just data, and the people at JPL had to put it on a piece of paper and colour the squares based on the. that stuff is really weird. So I don't know. I think the whole user interface in spaceships and science fiction stuff is going to be determined by how we interface with technology. I think the two are connected, because you only need an interface when there's no way to directly communicate with the thing, isn't there? So if you can plug yourself into the spaceship, you don't need an interface per se, do you? If we could plug ourselves into the computers, we wouldn't need an interface. We wouldn't need screens and keyboards, because we'd just be directly interfacing with them. So I think that's kind of how it's going to go. So sadly, the era of switches and dials is well, it's already gone really, but it's it's a historical curiosity now. So I think that's where it's likely to go. Now the problem for sci-fi movies is that doesn't look, doesn't look all that cool, does it? The holographic things is very swish and very cool, and it's very mainstream now. You don't see many user interfaces. I'm thinking of things like the Avengers and stuff like that. It's all high tech, funky looking screens, isn't it? So they're going to have to find another way to portray something that looks high tech, because that's all looking a little bit samey now. It's like, okay, it's just a hologram. So yeah. And social media creates echo chambers. Yes, that is definitely a problem there. That's definitely a problem there. Chris Viking with his faxes, excellent. So some strange stuff. So there we go. So that's my thinking on the way user interfaces will evolve. So there we go. Now I've actually got to get up early tomorrow, so I'm going to have to call it a night. Slightly earlier than normal. Although this stream was only supposed to be an hour and a half, and I've gone on for an hour and 50 minutes. So anyway, you got your money's worth. You're okay. But anyway, so have yourselves a fantastic week, my friends. It's obviously Monday. We've survived the first day of the week. There's a few more to go. So carry on. Head for the weekend. Keep yourself safe. Look after yourself. I will be back on Thursday. Now Thursday we're supposed to have patch 5, the one patch, the patch to finish and make everything perfect. I'm sure it won't be, but that's kind of how it's been billed now, isn't it? For Elite Dangerous, obviously, will it make a difference? We'll find that out on Thursday. We'll try and give that a good poke around. Again, I'm afraid there won't be a retro stream on Saturday because I'm off taking my youngest son canoeing because it's now summer. But hopefully the week after that we'll go back and do a bit more retro streaming and have a look at the ongoing history of space computer games. I think that's going to be good. So look after yourselves, be good, keep writing. Doomdocs, by the way, is going well. I'm down to the last 40 or so gotchas that I need to sort out for Doomdocs Revenge, so I'm making good progress. I want to try and get that finished for the end of next month if I can. That's my plan. So whatever your current project is, keep writing, keep working at it. It's all good to be creative. That's one thing that technology can't change, is the creative power of the human brain and storytelling. So something we still need no matter what technology we have, I think. That's what I'm telling myself. But be good. See you soon. Look after yourselves. Have a fantastic week ahead, my friends. And right on. See you soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.